All right, it's like 5:20 in the morning, and I just finished The Mandalorian episode 2, or chapter 18, as it were, episode 2 of season 3. Oh man, um, guys, this show, this is Star Wars. Like, there is a reason this show is like over and over and over again, resoundingly screaming out Star Wars at the top of its lungs, and just swinging and hitting it out of the park every freaking episode. Like the last. This the last half of chapter 18 is just some of the coolest Star Wars I've seen in a long, long time. We're gonna dive in. If you've never watched one of my reviews before, I don't do spoiler free. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, you'll want to walk away and come back later because you don't want to get things spoiled for yourself. Because I'm gonna talk about all the things in my show notes here. So get ready. You've had your warning. Three, two. Oh, and before we get going, yeah, if you have come back and you're watching this now, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Talk more about the end, about ways you could support the channel. But in the meantime, let's get into Chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore, giving you your last warning to walk away if you don't want things spoiled. 3, 2, 1, here we go. So at the very beginning, we get this return to one of the previous episodes where we're getting a snippet of how the tale of Mandalore and the mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore and the Mandalorians. And this is part of like the central core philosophy of those who believe in the creed, and also goes back to like the very first Mandalore who fought the mythological mythosaur in the caves in the mines of Mandalore. And it's a big cycle. And oh boy, is there a payoff. A payoff in this episode. We get an opening shot of pod racing on Tatooine, and we're back with our favorite mechanic, Pelimoto. And I love she's sitting here negotiating with this um Rodian, and it's like, it's gonna take me 2 months to fix this. It's not enough money, blah 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 blah. And then as he leaves, she calls the Jawas in. It turns out that they strip the things for parts to get the guy to come in to want to get it repaired. She charged him to repair it, and then they just reinstall the parts, painted, of course, so that he can't tell what they are. She's kind of scummy, but she did give Mando the ship that he's currently running around in, the Nabooian, the Nabooian. That wouldn't be how you say it, the Naboo fighter. Anyway, Mando flies in, and I love this when Grogu comes out of the pod, comes out of the cockpit, and he does the front flip into her arms. Just Grogu's growing a lot, and he's starting to become a lot more active in this season, which is pretty awesome. So there's this sequence there. He's here for the droid parts, obviously. She doesn't have anything, but she does have an R5 unit, which we'll see how this pans out in the long run. But he's a little timid and he's a little clunky, but she does manage to pawn him off on the Mando, and he's off to Mandalore with this droid to help him do his splunking. And on the way there, we're getting these shots of Mandalore when they get there, this planet-wide shot, and he's talking about how, you know, tales of back when it was green and whole, when the songs were written. He points to the moon Concordia, where he grew up, and then he shows the planet where Bo-Katan lives in the same system. And there's this message about learning maps and scopes so you can never be lost. And I knew that they were leading up to something with this because he was doing it in the last episode too. So he's been training Grogu in the ways of the Mandalore. I cannot wait. So Chris watched the first episode with me last night. She's about a week behind on things. And when they were forging the helmet at the beginning of the episode, Chris was like, "Are they making a helmet for Grogu?" And I was like, "How cool is that going to be when they get around to this at the end?" And because there's a sequence here, which I'll probably, if I don't forget to talk about it, Bo-Katan talks about there was a time when the Jedi used to fight alongside the Mandalorians, and I wonder if they're going to bring this full circle, like they are with many other things, and have the Jedi become a part of the Mandalorian way again, and also have Grogu be a Mandalorian with Jedi powers. How cool would that be? I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Anyway, they're descending into the atmosphere. Electronics are freaking out as they go through the clouds and rains and storms, and then poof, they're into this bleak landscape with clouds. And obviously, the nuking from the Purge has done a lot of damage, and it also is screwed with the magnetic field, so they can't get any messages out. So while they're down here, they are on their own. They do the landing. R5's super paranoid about taking the air sample, and of course, he disappears while he's out and about, which means Mandalorian has to go out there anyway. So he pressurizes his helmet because he's not sure if the atmosphere is good. Leaves Grogu in the ship, and he goes down into this cavern. And we see this amazing view of this underground city. And then, boom, he's attacked and gets these creatures who are kicking his ass. He pulls out the dark saber, and he still can't wield it. Like, this thing weighs a ton for him. He is struggle busing with the dark saber. He does eventually defeat these guys who jumped him. Um, but at great effort. It's not easy for him. Um, Finds the droid, gets back to the ship. Turns out the atmosphere is good, and he realizes now that Bo-Katan was right. Mandalore is not cursed. What other lies might he have been told about things over the years? That's a good question. Back to the caves, they get to the Civic Center, and they're jetpacking down is really cool as they go down the shafts. Really cool exploration episode. Seeing the little green-eyed creatures, watch them go past. Little wildlife action, which is really cool. Grogu does not like those little creatures, by the way. And then as we get deeper into these mines area, into this tunnel, we find a Mando helmet laying in the dust of the mine tunnel on the floor. It's all warped and distorted, and the Mandalorian's looking at it. This got me. I'm not gonna lie. I jumped like it was a jump scare. I totally was like, ah, because this thing comes up out of the floor and grabs the Mando and wraps him up in a cage, and it's this giant like spider droid thing. And I was like, oh snap. Leaves Grogu all alone. We then get this shot of a chamber with all these Mandalorian helmets lying around. The droid sets up this cage with Din Djarin inside, laid out horizontally, and then we realize that it's not a droid. It's this creepy, like General Grievous creature, comes skittering out of the machine, um, and it even sounds like Grievous when he's breathing, like and muttering away in some unknown dialect. Takes his blasters. The Mando's knocked out at this point. Grogu's out of his pod, creeping in. The creature's distracted, and Grogu tries to use the Force to raise the prison cell pod thing, and he can't, of course. But Din Djarin manages to come out of it and says, go get Bo-Katan. And then boom, this whole sequence is so cool because Grogu like does a double flip back into his pod, punches in the coordinates, his pod shoots out, and he's like racing off down the tunnels with this thing chasing behind him. And then he's past the little creatures who watched them come in earlier with the little green eyes, and they're jumping at him. And then he's back, and there's the humanoid-looking creatures, and he force blasts them out of the cave. And then he's into the ship, and as the ship is taking off, there's like a Minoc or something biting on the ship, but then they're into space. And all of his navigation lessons come into play here as he takes them back to Bo-Katan's planet. Now, Bo-Katan doesn't know anything that's gone on, so she sees Din Djarin's ship coming in, and she's not happy to see him. Let's get rid of him once and for all, is what she say. But then she finds Grogu, and he's kind of crying in his pod, and she's like, "What happened to him?" And then she's like, "All right, well, we gotta go rescue him." So she's. By the way, I love Bo-Katan's ship. That ship is just dope, man. Just really dope ship. So they're back to the planet, and this is a real homecoming for her because this is the remnants, and this is where she talks about the story of how the Jedi once fought alongside the Mandalorians many years ago. And she gives a speech about my family was the ruling class, I was the princess, and as they're in the tunnel, she hears something, gently pushes baby Grogu back, and then she's not a slouch. She's like, she knew there was an ambush here, takes these guys out with ease. And as Grogu watches, she turns around and she's like, "Oh, did you think your dad was the only Mandalorian?" And I was like, "Oh shit," because he really does. He's never seen another Mandalorian do the things that his dad can do. And she turns out that she knows these were called Alamites. We were the next meal. They used to live outside behind the city. If they survived, I wonder what else did. And that is such a forewarning for what is coming later on in the episode. Meanwhile, we're back to the creepy Grievous creature who's plugging something into the Mandalorian and into Din Djarin, and he's like draining his blood, I guess. But here's Bo-Katan, pew, 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 blasters going, but then he starts to kick her butt with this electricity rod, and then she sees the dark saber laying on the floor, and she grabs it with her tether. I'm just this is so awesome to me because who is the dark saber was hers, and it's a part of her legacy, and she grabs it. It's not heavy for her. Like, she is in tune with everything she needs to be in tune with, and she's flipping this thing around like butter, chops this, creature down. Um, doesn't realize that she hasn't killed it though. She goes over to try to talk to Din, and she's like, "Wake up, Din! Are you okay?" Blah 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 blah. And as this happens, the creature gets back into its big robot body and attacks her. And there's another fight sequence. But again, no problem. She has the dark saber. She kicks this thing's ass, completely kills it, wipes it out. Flawless victory. Um, and it makes her next conversation more powerful, as she's rescued Din, and she's giving this discussion about how she's just it makes all of her talk of being from the family of rulers feel all the more real, and the pain that she must feel because she once ruled here, and that's a living memory for her. And they have another spat here as the Mandalorian continues to talk about how he needs to find the waters of the mines to be redeemed, and she confronts him about the ridiculousness of the child's stories because there's nothing magical about the waters. And he's like, "Without the creed, what are we?" And he gives this speech, and eventually she's like, "You know what? I'll come with you, but don't thank me until you see the waters because there's nothing there. It's nothing fancy." And she's walking down with him and going through the remnants of the city and finding the mines and talking about how the time when she was a child bathing in the waters because she was the royal family and taking the creed. But she says the rituals were all just theater for our subjects. And they just wanted to watch the princess recite the tenets and the creed. And she says it was a heartwarming spectacle. But they have this discussion as well about her father, and she mentions him being a great man who died defending Mandalore. And there's this pause as Din watches her with a long silence and a very somber, "This is the way," to which she just watches on. And you get the sense that something is stirring within her at the fact that this man respects the legacy of her father in the same way that she does. And she gives him a silent answer. She doesn't reply. And then as Din walks off, she turns around and sees Grogu watching her. She very dryly asks, "What are you looking at?" But they get to the chamber, and there's a big plaque there which talks about how the mines have been here since the time of the great first Mandalore, Mandalore the Great, and how he supposedly tamed the mythical mythosaur that used to make the mines its lair. And from these legends, the skull symbol that defines Mandalore and its people was first taken. And he goes down into the water and does his speech about, "I swear on my name and the names of my ancestors that I shall walk the way of the Mandalore, and the words of the creed shall forever be forged in my heart." And then, bam, something pulls him down into the water. Bo-Katan goes in, and she goes down, 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 trying to find him, and finds Din on the bottom of this, lake, grabs him, and she's rising back up. And then as they are rising up out of the water, there's the mythosaur. And you get this clear sight of this massive head and the creature that makes the symbol for Mandalorians and the eye, and it's watching them as they flip. And Bo-Katan literally gasps within her helmet as they're raising up. And as they jump up out of the water and land on the platform and the stairs in front of the mines, in front of that pool of the waters, you know, she's starting to believe now. Like it's all like, holy shit, there's the mythosaur. That's not supposed to actually be a real thing. That's a mythical creature. And they don't say it, but the way the way this ended, the way that this episode ends with her gasping her helmet as she sees the mythosaur, you know, I'm supposing, I'm doing supposition here, but that Bo-Katan is right now having all of these thoughts about, holy crap, maybe all of the myths and maybe all the mythology and the religion around my culture, maybe there is at least a basis of truth in some of the legends that were told around, the more mythological components of this. So I can't wait to see where the show's going to go because I'm wondering if we're going to see Bo-Katan start to maybe become a believer in the creed more than she has been, or if they're even going to push her to the extreme of joining the Children of the Watch. I don't know yet, but holy crap, yeah, 15 out of 10 episode for me once again. Just this is peak Star Wars. I it just If you liked this, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Support if you can, please. Memberships here on the channel. Super thanks after it's been uploaded. Super chats and stickers during live streams. There's a Patreon page. Lots of different ways. Drop $2, $5, $20, whatever you can afford to keep me on the air full time. I do get to do this full time because of the support of everyone out there. So thanks, everyone. May the force be with you. Until next time.